that real full situational awareness of what's going on, where the fire is, fire that I may not be able to see from the ground. And as I mentioned before, the heat signatures, which may show a roof extremely hot or fire in an area that we didn't know. Or in some cases, we may have even seen a fire that spread from one building to another across the street.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 292. How are drones used by public safety organizations? For that question, we turn to Charles Werner, Director of the Drone Responders Public Safety Alliance, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to facilitate preparedness, response, and resilience using unmanned aircraft systems operated by public safety organizations. Charles is the retired Charlottesville, Virginia fire chief, a 44-year veteran of public safety, and an FAA-certified Part 107 remote pilot. He is also the chair of the National Council on Public Safety UAS. He serves on several local, state, and national committees and has authored more than 120 published articles on public safety. In 2020, the Airborne International Response Team and drone responders conducted a survey of public sector organizations on the use of drones in public safety. That survey identified 17 different missions where drones were used to support public safety. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Charles gives us an update on drone responders and provides some insights into the survey results and the growth of drones in advancing the public safety use of drones. But before we hear from Charles, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And by the way, if you have an idea for a great show and want to share your experience, please contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. So let's find out how drones are used by public safety organizations with Charles Werner of Drone Responders. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Charles to introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Charles Werner. I'm the director of the Drone Responders Public Safety Alliance.
Great, Charles. And what is the drone responders?
So Drone Responders is a nonprofit organization, really focuses on advancing the use of unmanned aircraft systems in public safety. So we bring together resources to the people who are looking to start programs, or we bring information from those who have already had successes and share those so that we can continue to advance the technology. And we do focus on all three aspects of the ecosystem of both enabling drones for good, countering drones for bad, and the unmanned traffic management piece.
And how long has Drone Responders been around?
Since April of 2019.
And can you tell us how it's grown? That's been, just over a year and a half, right?
Yes, we're now over 2,600 members, and we have participation from 40 countries.
Wow, that's great. How would you characterize the use or the growth of drones in public safety over the last few years?
Well, we went through some difficult regulatory times at first, the Section 333s and some of the early ability to fly. Unless you had an aviation wing, it was nearly impossible because of what you had to go through to get trained, almost to become a pilot to fly an unmanned aircraft system. In 2016, that changed with the COAs and Part 107, and then we started seeing more departments starting to get into it. And I think when we started, there were probably three main use cases: traffic crash reconstruction, search and rescue, and damage assessment. And that's kind of where we sat for a while.
I remember at one point speaking with you, and it seemed like agencies were evaluating, wondering if they should jump into a drone program. Today, it seems like they're fairly, I don't want to say commonplace, but it seems like many more public agencies are either looking or have a drone program.
Well, I think we've seen public safety grow exponentially, and it's because of word of mouth, because of seeing other departments be successful, the news coverage. It's also because they have an interest now to see, and the regulations are not quite as difficult. So we are seeing exponential growth. But what we are still seeing is some departments wanting to get into it, but still not knowing all the different aspects that they're going to be dealing with when they start a program. And that's why we have our guidelines and considerations document within the Drone Responders website that's free for anybody to get. It kind of goes through and says, if you're going to start a program, you might want to look through these things to understand all the different angles.
Over the last couple of years, you pretty much amassed a really good knowledge base of what is needed and what any public agency might encounter in thinking about starting a drone program.
We've learned from a lot of departments. We've received information such as SOPs, policy manuals, checklists, task books, and we've collected those and put them in the resource center. So in the beginning, everyone was literally starting from scratch. I remember when we were working with the Albemarle County Sheriff's Office in Virginia and the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, there were no manuals. There were no SOPs. So it really was reaching out to departments that we heard of to get what they had done and go forward. Now there is just a huge wealth of information available to reference.
Earlier, you mentioned three main use cases that pretty much dominated the presence of drones in the public safety area. How many different public safety use cases are there today? Have you guys tracked many?
So we did a spring study in 2020, and we came back with more than 17 use cases.
Really?
It was amazing. I knew that we had seen much more growth in the use cases, but I didn't know that it had gone that far.
What are the most common public safety use of drones?
I think the most common are overwatch of situations or early reconnaissance. For example, if you have a fire now, you can put a drone up and you can actually get a full 360-degree size up as well as what you can see from above. And in a fire situation, you can often see heat signatures, structural integrity issues that you couldn't see before. So it can tell you and warn not to put firefighters on a roof where they otherwise may have been in danger unknowingly. In a hazmat situation, I would say that a drone is a must-have. And the example demonstrated the most has been Southern Manatee, Florida Fire and Rescue. When they arrive on a hazmat scene, the drone goes up first because they're setting operations and setting up their decontamination area. And while they're doing that, the drone is taking reconnaissance. It's actually taking remote sensing to identify what the substance is. It's flying over and looking to see what the actual problem is and zooming in to help them understand what tools and what suits they need to wear. And I think they've said on average, it's dramatically increased their entry time and maybe even reduced their mitigation time by half. You can watch this operation, which are typically very dangerous. In the past, we couldn't because we have to stay at a certain distance. In this, we can do an overwatch. And if something changes that we're seeing above that they can't see, we can communicate by radio. But if the radio doesn't work, they have a speaker on the drone that can warn the firefighters or the hazmat technicians to get out of harm's way.
Are the drones taking advantage of automation, or is it still very much a pilot and control situation?
It's pretty much a pilot and control in those situations. I think what we're seeing more of the autonomous being used in searches for lost people, because they can set that up for a field and let it do, to go in grids so they can make sure that it covers a full area. The others are pretty much isolated. And, some of the other areas that we're seeing growth is traffic crash reconstruction continues to go forward. Damage assessment is still used quite a bit. I think I wrote my first article saying, I see 7 ways drones can be used in public safety. Now I would go through and say, I think drones can be used in almost every incident we respond to. What
are some of the lesser known applications in the public safety use area?
Some of the lesser known that I see is, and surprising to me, is lifeguards with drones. And we're seeing in some places where drones are now at the stations where the lifeguards are located. And in the past, similar, you'd have the closest lifeguard would take off to help the swimmer in trouble, and the next station over would be contacting the assistance needed. And now that still happens, but the next over station is actually launching the drone that carries a flotation device and actually, in almost every case, gets to the swimmer first and drops the flotation device, which means the swimmer's out of trouble more quickly, and the rescue swimmer doesn't get into that dangerous situation of trying to get control of a panicking swimmer. Some of the other things that are less known are some of the things that drones were used for in COVID-19. One example is flying overhead and being able to determine the temperature of a person if they're coughing and basically identify that they could be a COVID-19 patient or stricken with COVID-19. And that didn't go over very well. In Connecticut, they tried to do this and the public said, we think that's just invading our privacy a little too much.
Was that because the drone was actually maybe taking the temperature, doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it was getting too personal for people. And then the drone, even if it's in error with its temperature, now suddenly you're identified as a COVID-19 patient, and it made it difficult.
Any other examples?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that in hazmat situations, being able to fly over areas where we have a spill, now you're able to see a lot more areas that are impacted if the spill has gotten into a waterway. And then some people may not realize that they're using them for shark patrols along the beaches. And now some of the drones even are equipped with artificial intelligence, which can actually monitor what's in the water and actually identify a shark separately, even from a dolphin. And a warning goes out. Again, it's crazy. One of the other things that I didn't even think about was in Las Vegas, they have these monsoons that come that are really heavy rain for very short periods of time, but they create a significant amount of flooding in their canals. And what they were able to do is when they knew these type of weather events are coming, they're now able to fly the drones in advance of that and warn homeless people who may be living in those canals to get out of harm's way, where in the past they'd be doing rescues.
One of the things that really intrigued me over the last year were hearing stories of how drones were being used to assist in the first responders for police operations, where drones were sent out ahead of the dispatch of an officer to check to see what the situation was.
There's a couple of those situations. So Chula Vista is part of the FAA's integration pilot program. So they have been doing this for, I guess, nearly 3 years and have, I think, probably close to 2,000, if not more, flights where they actually fly immediately from dispatch for specific types of calls, as you mentioned. And it's getting really important situational awareness. It's assisted with helping to up the priority of calls where more assistance is needed that didn't come in that way as a call, or to downgrade the priority so that they can actually release some of the police units and not be needed. So they're able to increase resources when needed and remove them when not. And then we're seeing the same kind of thing that they're now working with the fire department as well, where they're getting eyes on the scene, almost always there first, providing information about the fire conditions and providing that now visually to the fire department as well. And one particular case that I want to bring up is important because their chief, Roxanne Kennedy, came on and was telling us about a person who was seen outside of a restaurant who appeared to have a gun and was acting erratically at one of the tables. And the police, of course, the drone was there first doing reconnaissance and zooms in. And while it zooms in, it happens to notice that this guy lights his cigarette with this device. So it's a cigarette lighter gun, not a gun. So that information is then relayed to the police officers, and that de-escalates the whole situation to where they can walk in now freely and say, look, you're making people nervous. Can you please leave? And so that's a way of how it de-escalates. Just last week or the week before, I can't remember how recent it was, another angle that police are doing is indoor flying of the drone. And they're able to fly in now and do a room sweep with a light on it. So a room that's dark can be lit and looked around, and a police officer doesn't have to be in harm's way to do that room sweep. And in this particular case, captured on video, the suspect comes out, and it's a suspect for a murder. And he sees the drone. The drone has a speaker, gives instructions, and then you see him turn around, walk out the door with his hands above his head, and this apprehension takes place with no other actions necessary. And we've seen that people that are trying to evade escape, once they realize the drone's overhead, they stop and give up.
Do any of the use cases pose any special challenges in terms of either, the operation, dealing with people, all those kind of things?
Well, I think one of the things we've seen with the major cities, and this came out of New York City with FDNY, they did 2 years of research before actually starting their program. In the big cities, especially the ones that have high-rise buildings, you have a couple different things that make it difficult. One is they have a lot of magnetic interference. He jokes around and says how he has a 5-cent compass that he keeps with him that he pulls out to look to see what the compass does before he even launches the drone, because if there's a lot of magnetic interference, you're not going to have good control of the aircraft. In addition to that, in those situations, you have unique weather situations where those tall buildings create kind of an urban canyon, so the winds can shift and change, and you can have micro weather systems that do that. And then anytime we're flying over people, it's particularly important that we're careful about how we do that. And oftentimes we'll fly on the fringes so that we're not directly over the people. And in most cases, the zoom capability gives the ability to zoom in and see what we need to see.
Today's drones with the cameras, how good is the zoom capability?
Well, I guess somebody put it to me by saying you could be flying at 300 feet and read the letters on someone's tennis shoes. In Richmond, Virginia, we had the York County, Virginia Fire, Life Safety, and Sheriff's team on scene doing an overwatch, and mainly to make sure that we didn't have any issues between pedestrians and vehicles. And what happened was there was a report of 3 men with long guns, and there was a helicopter flying over as well from the Virginia State Police, but it couldn't get anywhere near the people because trees and, you can't get that low. And they immediately called over to the drone, and they actually located the 3 men within a couple minutes.
Has there been a use case that you've come across that really has surprised you or really made you go, wow?
I think it's the hazmat more than anything, because it just changes the dynamic so much of that operation from a safety aspect of the information that you're able to obtain, the overwatch you're able to maintain. It's had that wow factor of you can turn the thermal image on and you can see escaping gas or a plume that may be invisible to the naked eye. So it just really illuminates things that you otherwise would never know until you actually ran into a problem with it.
When you see the drones being used in today's firefights, what do you see and what's your level of appreciation for what they're able to deliver to the team on the ground?
So I did 37 years in the fire service, and then I spent 2 years as an emergency manager, and then I spent 2 years also as a reserve deputy. So I've got kind of a viewpoint from all three aspects. So in a firefighting situation, I'm able to get that real full situational awareness of what's going on, where the fire is, fire that I may not be able to see from the ground. And as I mentioned before, the heat signatures, which may show a roof extremely hot or fire in an area that we didn't know. Or in some cases, we may have even seen a fire that spread from one building to another across the street because the wind blew something over that you would, again, never have seen that. And then you're able to also see the position of your firefighters. And if you go to a thermal view, you can actually see your firefighters operating around the different parts of the scene. And if it's at night, you immediately illuminate them to the point that you can see them where you would not be able to see them at all. So it's a dramatic difference for that. From wildfire situations, we're seeing the knowledge they're getting from drones now as far as the direction of fire and how close proximity firefighters are to the head of the fire is dynamically changing. And now we're starting to see that drones are being used for preventive things. So they're actually doing analysis of the fuel load on the urban wildfire interface so that there can actually be preventive measures taken to eliminate some of that fuel load to separate from some heavier populated areas.
Do they do that during the fire, or they do that as a sort of a mitigation technique?
No, they do that in advance as a mitigation technique.
How is the public opinion, do you think, with drones, particularly for public safety?
So the public opinion is very good. I think we saw a major change that came out of the missions flown for hurricanes. There was a lot of news stories that came out. There was flights that were in combination with manned and unmanned aircraft simultaneously, lots of the ability to locate people that needed to be rescued. And again, the wildfires in California, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but they've now integrated it into GIS to where they were putting the maps up with links to panoramic views. So people who could not go back into their neighborhoods could actually go into the map and see the condition of their homes, and in a lot of cases, totally destroyed. But what that did is it gave them the knowledge of what their situation was and helped to share that information with the insurance companies to make the claims happen more quickly. So from that standpoint, it's been very helpful. Also, people can see what's happening as far as the fires that they hear about, and they don't know what the magnitude is. But there are some things that have been troubling that we have to be careful of. And that's why one of the things that we did is we published the 5 C's, which is a document designed to deal with the principles for responsible flight and maintaining public trust. And that's aimed more at law enforcement. You've always got to keep in mind the perspective and the perception of people who read the story that's going to be out there. My city manager always told me, don't have a story come out on the 6 o'clock news that has the wrong story. And the example that I would give there is a story that came out and said police officers use drones to monitor nude beach. And it was COVID, it was the nude beach, it was all this stuff. Now, while technically they probably were doing it with every great intention, you have to think about what the news story in the headline looks like, because oftentimes people don't read the article.
We hear that drones can save lives. What are some of the ways in which you've been able to track the use of drones and how they actually do save lives?
I think one of the big areas is finding lost people. There's a lot of drone videos around the world, for that matter, that you're able to use the drone to search areas more quickly, to search areas that you may not be able to access on foot. that you can search at night using thermal imagery, which gives you a distinction between the person and the ground that they're walking on. And the other thing is that we're able to actually, in the hazmat situation, we can fly in and we can assess, is there people down? And we can go in and deal with that. On the law enforcement side, it's really important because they can fly in, they can do reconnaissance of a place they're going to make an entry, and they can see what that total environment looks like. And they can monitor the operation as it takes place. There's one operation in the California Sheriff's Office where they're monitoring the entry. And as they make entry into the building, there are people coming out the windows and the back doors. One person throws drugs out the window, and another person throws a gun up on the roof. Person who's leaving the back through some shrubbery peels off his shirt from a black shirt to a pink shirt and is walking up the street, obviously doing this before, thinking that he's in the clear when the drone's got eyes on it the entire time to tell the police officers. And as he approaches the police, they ask him, have you seen a guy in a black shirt? Him not knowing that they actually know he's the guy in the pink shirt. And so they've done that. As I mentioned, it's helped to be preventive by having the ability to see sharks and identify swimmers and surfers. The lifeguard being able to drop a flotation device. London Fire has done a demonstration showing a drone dropping a flotation device in the rapids, a pinpoint drop where these are one of the most dangerous situations we're in trying to rescue people. It's being used to identify areas where crocodiles are so that it can warn people in the area of crocodiles. It just goes on, but I think from the law enforcement side, being able to fly in these buildings now inside and do room sweeps, that's a dramatic change of putting someone in harm's way. And you can imagine in an active shooter situation, we also work with the FAA to get what's called the Tactical Beyond Visual Line of Sight waiver, which now lets us fly beyond visual line of sight for 1,500 feet out and 50 feet within a building, not to exceed 400 feet or the ceiling grid. So that if we have an active shooter situation or a hazmat situation that we can't get close enough to, and anything that poses a danger to our remote pilot or visual observer, we can fly beyond visual line of sight within those limits, which is a dramatic change.
This past summer, with a lot of the protests and some of the demonstrations and civil unrest, did you record any use cases of any agencies that were using drones to help monitor or try to keep tabs on the situation?
Yeah, there was a lot of that, especially after the protests started becoming violent and having vandalism. People were starting to put the drones up so that they could actually have situational awareness of areas that might be outside the initial area where they had gotten reports of some things. So yes, that was being done. I think, it's very important that you maintain an openness with your public about what you're going to use a drone for and what you're not going to use a drone for. And I think what most places, part of our 5 C's is just don't be doing random surveillance with drones. If you've got a particular thing that you're doing to protect the public, then that should be what you're doing and maintain that kind of mission.
Do you advocate for, say, agencies to develop their drone policy in advance on what it is they're going to use and how they're going to use it and all that kind of stuff and publish it before they actually start using it?
Yes. As drone responders, we actually have an outreach program that actually methodically will give you a way to go forward and develop the strategy of what your policies and procedures are, and then actually have town hall meetings and share this information with the public to have hands-on demonstrations so they can see what the drone looks like. Because when you say drone, some people still think predator. They're thinking military stuff. And we're talking very small. We're talking about very specific operations. And people want to ask questions and they want to know. So yeah, it's very important. That's the most important thing to do from the very beginning, is to maintain transparency before you even launch your program.
Well, that kind of goes into my next question about how drone responders advance the public safety use of drones. So building off of that one example, what are the ways that drone responders does that?
So what Drone Responders does is serves as a resource first. We have the resource center so people can come and get the information, considerations and guidelines. They can get SOPs, policy manuals, task books, checklists, those kind of things to help them from other departments similar to themselves, so they don't have to start from scratch. We also provide the public safety content for Commercial UAV Expo, AUVSI Exponential, Commercial UAV Europe, Energy Drones and Robotics, and then we're also doing presentations around the country. We did the Arizona Drone Conference, the Pennsylvania Drone Conference. We've done presentations at Unmanned Systems Canada, and I'll be doing something for the World Congress on Drones and Robotics. So we're out there, we're working with the FAA to continue to hear from our stakeholders to say what we need to be working on. And I'm excited to say that in December, a date yet to be announced, we will begin monthly webinars with the FAA, basically called a conversation with the FAA about Public Safety UAS. And we'll do that once a month. and it'll give us a chance to have an ongoing conversation to share wants, needs, and desires.
So what's next for the public safety use of drones?
As we see remote ID, that's going to come out. We hope the rule is going to come out in December. And that's going to give us the ability to identify aircraft that are flying when we're flying, so we can determine who's authorized and who's not, where now we don't have that capability. And even if we can't identify, if there is no signal coming from that, we know that that's not an authorized drone that's meeting the remote ID rule. But I think that and the operations over people and the type certifications are all going to play into allowing us to have more autonomous flights and then get into more beyond visual line of sight flights that are longer. So we could do much more extensive search and rescue situations beyond visual line of sight in areas that are rural, that really aren't populated heavily, but we can now fly more freely and autonomously. I think that's going to be the big change. And then I think the exciting thing is we're continuing to see development in the next size, the over 55s, of what's that going to look like for public safety. And, we've got to keep our eye on what we're doing now and keep making it better, but also looking for and preparing for what's coming next.
Technology-wise, what sort of enhancements do you see coming in the area of public safety use of drones?
What we've seen so far is it's been more focused on, what we say typically is one drone is none and two drones is one. Meaning that you've got to have reliability and redundancy because one, the drone may not start, you got to have another one. And then to maintain that constant overwatch, one's got to go out when one comes back. But right now it's 1-to-1 controls. You can't do 1-to-2. And we're hoping that's going to change as well. So we can have one pilot actually controlling two aircraft. So the one can go out, the other can come back without having two separate people doing that with two setups. One of the things that's out there that's really interesting that's taken hold in the fire service is the tethered drones. Because under the Reauthorization Act of 2018, I think, the actively tethered drone can fly 150 feet. It's usually mounted on a fire apparatus or emergency vehicle or in a compartment, or it can be in its own case. But it can fly without a COA or Part 107 trained remote pilot. So it can, and that tether maintains a constant power, so it can put itself up, fly, give both visual optics and thermal, and maintain that constant overwatch. Now, that's more for a confined place. So if you're in an incident like a fire or a hazmat situation, you could probably put that up and let it maintain overwatch. But for things that you got to cover other areas, it wouldn't suffice.
Is there anything that we missed, Charles, that we should touch upon?
No, I think that we have only seen the tip of the iceberg as far as the use cases. We're going to continue to see this expand in other areas. And as we have more freedoms and the ability to go beyond where we are regulatorily, we're going to see it change even more.
And my final question, Charles, what message would you like to leave regarding the public safety use of drones?
Yeah, I'd like to leave a message that if you're a public safety agency, you need to have a drone program or the access to drone services through another department, through mutual aid, because I often ask people, would you make command decisions with your eyes closed? And if you're not flying a drone to see some of the conditions that you can't see from the ground, you're doing just that.
That's it for episode 292 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Charles Werner of Drone Responders. I want to thank Charles for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about drone responders, or view the results of the survey, or just want to connect with Charles, check out the webpage at droneresponders.org. If you want to learn more about drone responders, view the results of the survey, or want to connect with Charles, check out the webpage at droneresponders.org. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll download more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.